fire door, obviously it's a critical and vital part of any building.
What people don't always recognise that this isn't just an ordinary door. It's an engineered safety product. It's a product that's going to save people's lives, but don't necessarily realise that they've got to be fire rated. Every door carries some instructions that help people understand all the components that have to be fitted to that door. Labels are very clearly able to identify what the fire rating is for the door. It tells you the name of the manufacturer, and it's also got a unique traceability code. The frame needs to be compatible with the door, and it ideally wants to have a certificate on it that shows that it's certificated for that particular job.
And in terms of, like, I've noticed the grooves on them as well, haven't I?
Yeah, the grooves are there to be able to take what's called intumescent strips. This one is a plain intumescent seal. The grooves are designed to be able to take this, it's 15mm by 4mm, and they're there to expand if there is a fire and seal the door in its place. The alternative is the smoke seal, which is, this one's a combined smoke and intumescent seal. All fire doors are governed by fire door regulations, and in certain regulations you need to have smoke seal protection.
So if we come back to the door now, we've got our frames in place. I'm assuming now we have to kind of look at some kind of seal around it with the gaps that are...
Yeah, you've got to think about the fact that the door frame is going to be fitted into a wall, and you don't want any gaps in that wall between the frame and the wall itself. So you need to fill that gap with a non-combustible material, usually rock wool or something like that,
yeah.
Or you can use intumescent seals, which also will expand in the event of a fire and will prevent fire and smoke from getting between those small gaps.
So now we've got our kind of frames in place now. We're happy it's sealed, it's got the intumescent sealant around the edges. Now do we move towards fitting the door?
Yeah, we need to turn our attention to the door. We need to prepare the door, ready to take the hinges and to take any locks and latches. The hinges have to be CE marked, and in the case of the BRF certifier scheme, we recommend the certifier approved because that gives you approval to show that they've got some sort of certification and traceability. In the case of a 1-hour fire door, it's advisable to then put an intumescent pad behind the hinge so that when you're fitting that onto the door, you continue that intumescent material to help protect it in the event of a fire.
And I noticed on this kind of sample we've got here that we've also got it wrapped around the actual mechanism.
Yeah, that applies also to locks and latches, and here's an example where it's got intumescent material all the way around. In the event of a fire, again, this material will expand and seal any gaps and protect it. In order to make a fire door work correctly, it's essential to make sure you've got constant gaps around the two edges and the top of the door. The recommended gap is 3 to 4mm, and this is a gap tester, which is something that will help you check that you've got that equal spacing around the two edges and the top of the door.
Just thinking back on the door as well, on a normal door, not a fire door, you can actually trim it. Is that the same with a fire door?
There are trim allowances on a door, and it'll explain that again. In this case, it talks about trim measurements of a maximum of 4mm on each side. So you've got some trim allowance, not on the top, because it's essential that we keep that label that shows the certification information.
Probably the next two final steps here we've got to put on the closer.
Yeah, the closer needs to be CE marked and certifier approved. You've got to make sure that the door closer is correct for that particular weight of door. Fire doors are heavy. They're a lot heavier than ordinary lightweight interior doors. So you've got to have a closer that's going to be able to open and close that door correctly.
And it's got to also kind of have a reasonably consistent close to it.
Yeah, it's got to be able to close the door in a controlled way, and it's got to close it onto the latch if there is a latch, or if it's an unlatched door, then it's got to close it against what we call the door stop to make sure that it's permanently closed and held there.
Okay. So we've done it. What would be, in your checklist, if you were trying to tell some of the installers, what would your checklist be?
The main items of the door are the frame and how that's positioned and fixed, the hinges and how they're positioned and fixed and the type of screws that are fitted to it, that the door is sealed, it must have intumescent seals on it in order for it to work, that the door and frame fit correctly and you've got a 3mm gap between the two sides and the top, and the locks and latches and the closers are compatible with the fire door evidence.
Okay. And what would be your final word to everybody who's fitting fire doors?
Fire doors are not just ordinary doors. They're a life-saving product that will save lives and save property, and they've got to be fitted correctly.